The story of David and Goliath. Of course, this is not a well-known story in the scripture, so will probably be really a strange thing to us. Of course, that tongue is in cheek. We know it very well, and sometimes that can be a hindrance because we bring all of our baggage and we kind of import it upon the text. This is especially true with this story because it is taken out of context a lot. Whenever you have a story that's isolated and it's a good story, a good drama, good adventure, hero wins in the end, it's very easy to just kind of lift that out of the scripture and forget what's going on all around it, and how this story really enhances the overall theme of 1 Samuel, and that's God looking for a good leader. The house of Eli didn't stand up to the job or the task. The judges before him didn't. Samuel wasn't going to be able to pass on his legacy to his sons because they certainly weren't ready to lead Israel. Saul was chosen as king, but this was the people's choice, really. They wanted a king, and yet God has chosen a man, and this will be the man that will lead them, but he's not on the scene yet. Of course, Israel has really withered under the leadership of Eli and Saul up to this point. Samuel is that bright ray of hope. He just provides the stability, spiritually speaking, for the whole nation. So if there is any vacuum in leadership, he is doing an able job of filling that vacuum. Saul is the nation's first king at this point in Israel's history, and so he's the only man that the people have known as king. But the whole idea behind the people appointing him king was this desire that they had to be like the other nations. It wasn't a spiritual desire, it was a worldly desire. And so the people believed a human ruler would give them the security that they so desperately wanted. I mean, you have to think about the time that they were living in. They were always being harried about by enemies. If it was not the Philistines, it was the Midianites. If it wasn't them, it was some other ite that was after the children of Israel. So they were struggling a great deal with this. We read in 1 Samuel chapter 8, this is material we covered, but in 1 Samuel chapter 8 and verse 20, while living in the chaotic rule of the judges really and coming out of that, their whole idea was, give us a king, and that king will judge us, and he'll do a great job. And not only that, but he will go before us. Now this is amazing when you consider the story we're about to read. He will go before us, and he will fight our battles. That's 1 Samuel chapter 8 and verse 20. Well, that didn't work out too well in the valley of Elah. Saul rejected the word of the Lord, we were told in 1 Samuel chapter 15, and the Lord rejected him from being king over the nation. Now Israel is in a precarious situation, which we talked about last week, where you've got this tension that exists between David and Saul. And David's not the king yet, Saul's still the king, and God is going to use a very tense time through the end of the book before David assumes rule in 2 Samuel. And so this is very difficult. David was anointed by Samuel, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him last week. But remember what the Bible also said in the very next verse, the very next verse, the Spirit of God departed from Saul as well. And so this is an omen, of course, a bitter one for the nation. Now we come to 1 Samuel 17 and this famous biblical story of David and Goliath. Or if you watch the claymation version, Davy and Goliath, right? And my kids love that. And you look at 1 Samuel 17, and it's favorite for many people because we kind of make this kind of the story, whether it's big business going up against the small consumer that's getting cheated out of all of his money. You've got the David and Goliath story there, the corporate world and the people that are being taken advantage of, our big government and what they're doing. And so this motif certainly has been playing out in society for long enough, and America's built on this idea of the underdog. It resolves, of course, with the godly man defeating the ungodly enemy, and he is an ugly, big, old enemy. And everyone wants to know that the bigger they are, the harder they fall, right? And that's the idea here, what we see in the text. It's important that when you view the battle, you view it through the eyes of David, because David doesn't have a focus on the giant in front of him. He has a focus on the God above him. And I like that because, many times that's what we're doing. We're focusing on this temporal world, we're focusing on the difficulties, and that leads to heightened anxiety in our lives. And that leads to the disillusionment, the depression, the struggles that we see in the lives of many people. Many people that should be here tonight, but they're not here. They need God's help. They need to focus on God. Instead, they're focusing on this world and what they're going to do and what's going to happen. And they're wringing their hands, but God doesn't wring his hands. This is exactly what we were talking about this morning with the church at Smyrna. So let's go ahead and look then at the first three verses of 1 Samuel 17. 1 Samuel 17 and verse 1. And we'll read through verse 3. We'll go just through verse 11 tonight and kind of set the stage. Here we read, "Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle, and were gathered at Socoh, which belongs to Judah. And they encamped between Socoh and Azekah and Ephes Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them." Okay, so as we hit the text, the first thing that we are learning is the lay of the land. And so you have it up here before you. You've probably seen maps like this. When you look at the map, you have in the center a valley. Even today in this modern picture that we have of this area, you have a road that splits through it. At the bottom, flattened out part of the valley. And then on either side you have a mountain. The photo, of course, is taken from the perspective of Azekah. And you can see where the Philistines camped with the arrows there, or the lines, and also where Saul camped. We're told in the text, if you followed all along in 1 Samuel, we're told that the Philistines are the ones that have a firm hand of control over the region. It's not like Israel has control over the region and the Philistines are infiltrating and taking advantage of weakness in Israel. Israel's already weak, and the Philistines are dominant. So don't get the wrong idea here. Israel has already been subservient to the Philistines. We have witnessed a few flash of victories in the book itself, but the Israel hasn't won the war. And so we are told that Saul gathers the army of Israel to go and to meet the threat of the amassing Philistines, who are actually already in Israel's territory. That's how brazen they are. I mean, they're in an area where this is Judah, basically. They're in an area where Israel should have control, and yet they don't. Saul is camped in the valley of Elah. That opens up to the central coast plain. And that's, of course, where the Philistines are dominant upon the coast. And with shipping, they're seafaring people. And so now you've got this conflict that's brewing. And it's going to take us to David and Goliath. But remember that these men are representative of the armies of each side. If you take the story out of context, you might come to different conclusions about what's happening before you. This is just not a narrow, microscopic picture of a man against a man. I mean, this is nation against nation, and it is a very big deal. In fact, the Philistines are very prominent, that they're so prominent they're woven throughout the whole book of 1 Samuel. You remember when we were in 1 Samuel chapter 4, that's when we first encountered them. The Philistines were in that chapter. They captured the ark of Eli. And Gath, where Goliath hails from, is one of the 5 cities of the Philistines that ends up housing the ark. And of course, all kinds of terrible things happen to the Philistines. They get rid of the ark. And yet before that, the ark had been captured, and the house of Eli plummeted, and Eli and his sons die in the melee that takes place between Israel and the Philistines. When we turn to 1 Samuel chapter 7, you have there a record of how the Lord delivered Israel from the Philistines, because Israel had finally started to turn back to the Lord. And yet that threat never is done away with totally. It still looms. In chapter 8, Saul fights the Philistines. Chapter 13 and chapter 14. In chapter 14 and verse 52, it says, "There was fierce war with the Philistines all the days of Saul." So he's not going to die until chapter 31 of this book. And so all throughout his reign, there is this fight between Israel and the Philistines. So now we come to chapter 17. And, in military parlance, they would say the sit rep is much the same, right? Everything is happening exactly like it was happening before. The Philistines are amassing. They didn't do away with their enemy, and so now the enemy has come back to fight again. In verse 2, the Philistines gather under capable leaders because of the verbs that are used in verse 2. You notice very active verbs that are being used for the Philistines, and very passive verbs that are being used for Israel. So the idea is here that Saul musters along with the troops. They're all getting together to fight the Philistines. But Saul doesn't stand out from among the masses. He's not leading them. He's just there along for the ride. But when it comes to the Philistines, they have strong leadership, and they're actively engaged, and they're moving toward beating Israel, and maybe paying them back for the last conflict that they had, where they were routed and they were chased back into their land. Verse 3, it says, "The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side with a valley between them." And so that's this open, wide valley that you see before you. Each army has its opposing high ground. And this battle won't be settled by the armies going at each other. Instead, this battle is going to be settled by representatives from each army. We know the end of the story. It will be David and Goliath fighting for both nations. Now, let's look at verse 4 in 1 Samuel 17, and let's read through verse 11. "And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail," armor. "And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and he had bronze armor on his legs, and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels. And a shield bearer went before him. And then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, 'Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistines said, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all of Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Give me a man. They were dismayed and greatly afraid. Doesn't seem to be any men there. You know what I mean? Nobody is courageous and brave enough to do what God would bid him to do. You say, "Well, I wouldn't do it either." I understand that, but David did. You look at relatively the size of David compared to that of Saul, Goliath rather, you know that his eyes were not focusing upon his enemy. They were focusing upon his God. And so, if we look at the text then, we kind of get an idea of the size of this man. This is an infographic, you can compare that little figure there. You see, I don't know if you can read a lot of what's on the infograph, but that little figure right here, that's David. Maybe about 5'2". This is Shaquille O'Neal's height, 7'1". He's a big man, a very big man. This is Goliath, 9'6" according to the Masoret text, the Hebrew text. So you say, are you trying to tell me that there was actually a man that was 9 feet 6 inches tall? Absolutely, that's what I'm telling you. I'm not telling you that at all. God's word is telling us that. And either we believe it or we don't. I believe it. You say, well, it has to be a mistake. Nobody could be that big. Well, yeah, somebody could be that big, and somebody was that big. And so this was a menacing thing. This was something that could not be approached in any kind of human way. Nobody that's 5'2" is going to array himself with no armor or anything like that against such a giant of a man who's fully equipped, and who even has somebody who is standing before him, shielding him from any kind of arrows or spears or anything like that. Goliath's name, that in and of itself is synonymous with overwhelming odds. There are even books that the titles are things like Slaying Your Goliath, So the idea here is we're facing overwhelming odds, and we need some Davids in this world to slay the Goliaths that are around us. And so what do we learn here? Well, we learn he's a big man, he's tall. We've already mentioned that. You say, well, what do we say about that? Well, we should say what God said in 1 Samuel 16 and verse 7. Right? Do you remember that from last week? God told us in that verse, look, you might be looking at the outward appearance, but I look at the heart. And so you better focus on me. You better not focus on what you see around you. That's not reality. Reality is what you don't see as you're depending upon me. It's almost like you got to have the eyes open, Gehazi, so you can see those masses that are with us. You can't see them physically, but they're there. God is there. And that's how it was for David. His armor, as far as Goliath's armor, was mainly bronze, the text says. The spearhead, if we put it in our understanding of weight today, I mean, we don't weigh things in shekels. I don't anyway. You're looking at a spearhead that weighs roughly the weight of a good-sized bowling ball, a 15-pounder. Right? That's huge. I can't even imagine. Imagine a bowling ball at the end of your spear, and you hold it like it's nothing. Well, if you're 9'6", maybe you can do that. That's what Goliath was doing. I look at that and I just marvel at it. Remember, too, that does Israel have these iron weapons? I mean, we've already been told in the text that they don't, because the Philistines have control over them, and they've made it so they have a monopoly on these iron weapons, and Israel can't produce iron weapons for themselves. It's not that they couldn't learn how to do it. They're the poor ignorant ones that have been in this kind of third world status, and they're just not smart enough to handle it. No, that's not what's going on at all. What's going on is they've been oppressed for many years, and it's the Philistines that are doing that, keeping them from having or developing the military tech that would be superior, or that would at least give them a fair fighting situation. So the bronze armor, also bronze helmet. The bronze helmet is pretty big. It's got to fit a big head. And yet it doesn't fit a big face, a big old forehead. We'll find that out later in the story. The bronze armor that went over his midsection, this is unbelievable, but I mean, I believe it, but it's just amazing. 126 pounds. That's a lot of weight. I mean, that's what he put on himself. I mean, impenetrable. But what are you going to do if somebody has 126 pounds of bronze armor on their midsection? With the weapons that they had in that day, it's not like you have 50 caliber rounds. It's not like you have an RPG and you can light them up. No, there's nothing like that. All right, they've got these man-made weapons, and so he's protected by this armor. Even his legs are protected by the bronze armor, we're told in the text. So he has these defenses and this size that's overwhelming, impenetrable. And that's all of this is the point of the story. You say, well, why all these details? Because I think these details are given to us so that we will see how easy it is to fixate on Goliath and not on God. That's the point of the text. A weaver's beam, the javelin that he talks about, I don't think it's a javelin in the sense that we understand a javelin. When it says that it had a spear like a weaver's beam, I mean, the weaver's beam, as far as the part of the weaver's beam that they're talking about, isn't enormous in size. So that's not the issue. It seems to be the way that this particular javelin was made. Maybe it had some kind of device on it. I've got an article here from one of the encyclopedias or Bible encyclopedias that I have. Maybe it had some kind of a thong of leather on it. It was something that the warrior could sling in a way. Maybe there was a way to retract this thing so that he could have it and continue to use it over and over again. I'm not exactly sure about the function of this particular weapon, but I know that it must have been pretty ominous and something very difficult to go up against. And so I'm sure that Goliath was very adept at using this weapon, although he never gets a chance to use it. Goliath is protected, it says in the text, by a shield bearer. I don't know if I'd like that job, but that's a massive shield, putting it in front of a man that's 9 foot 6 inches. And not only that, he had a menacing disposition about him. He was able to cry out across the valley so that Israel would hear him. His voice thundered across that valley. And he menacingly asks in chapter 17 and verse 8, "Why have you come out to line up for battle?" This really adds to the emphasis in 1 Samuel. Why have you come out? You're leaderless. You don't have a leader. I mean, it's almost as if he's just dismissing Saul. He knows what people are saying. He can take the pulse. He's not this big, ignorant oaf that people make him out to be. He's a warrior, yes, but he knows how to size the situation up. And so Goliath capitalizes on Israel's passivity due to all of this. Even more menacing is the emphasis of Goliath with his taunt. He says, "Am I not a Philistine? Am I not a Philistine?" The idea of "am I" is an emphasis in the Hebrew. Am I not a Philistine? Look at me. I am the embodiment of the Philistines. That's what he's saying. And you? Who are you? Now we got the word servant, and that can be used not in a pejorative way, but it is used pejoratively here. In other words, and who are you? You are dog-like slaves of Saul. And indeed, they were. Because they had chosen it to be that way. You can imagine him just spitting out Saul's name and not having any respect for Israel or Israel's king, and certainly not Israel's God. The rest of verse 8, he says, choose a man for yourselves. Choose a man, if you have one. Choose him for yourselves, and let him come down to me. And so this is the heart of the conflict, and this sets up the fear that we see at the end of our passage tonight. So they had chosen a man already. Remember? His name was Saul. They chose a man. But the man was not up to the task. God chose a man. That man was up to the task. Saul was head and shoulders above everyone in the land as far as physical impression. But when it comes to David, nobody would have even thought of him going up against Goliath. But God knew. God knew the end from the beginning in this thing. And so all this chosen man needed was to go down and to fight Goliath, that is Saul, in a winner-take-all grudge match, and he won't do it. Nobody in the army will do it. Which tells you where Israel's at and how this leaderless nation is struggling as far as faith in God is concerned. He says in verse 9, if he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. I mean, this is a good deal for the Philistines, right? Don't go into a conflict with Israel. We've got the superior warrior. Why don't we just save the lives of many in Philistia this day and allow Goliath to fight our battles? And the people, remember what they said in 1 Samuel chapter 8, we have chosen a man to go out and he will fight our battles. Well, where is he? MIA, right? He's missing in action, absent without leave. Maybe he's hiding underneath the stuff. Only it's not humility that's driven him there. It's fear this time. He's not trusting in God. And so you don't hear anything across that valley. It's quiet. Crickets, right? And then all of a sudden, Goliath thunders again in verse 10. He says, and the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. Give me a man. I don't see anybody coming across this valley. Give me one. And he wouldn't see anyone come across that valley for day after day after day, even as he taunt the armies of Israel. So, is there not a man? He mocks and he scorns. When it says he defies, that's what it's talking about. He's mocking and scorning the army of Israel. And so, by extension, what is he doing? He's mocking and scorning Saul, Israel's king. And by extension, what is he doing? He's mocking and scorning the God of Israel. David will pick up that very perceptively, and he will say, is there not a cause? And he will go out and he will fight the battle, and he will do it for the glory of God. You say, but Goliath is a big man, a very big man, very big, scary man, in a very big, scary valley in front of everyone. I'm not going out there. And so we can understand that maybe from a human perspective, but that's the theme today. We could have understood that when we looked at the church at Smyrna, right? It was a big, scary situation that church was in. And yet, if you keep your eyes on the big man in the big valley and not in the big sky where the big God is, right, then you're going to get off track. And that's what's happening to Israel. Is there not a cause? Just as the church of Smyrna needed to stop fearing and to keep on being faithful and trusting in the Lord to deliver them, even so, the people here in Israel needed to do the same. And so should we. We need to stop fearing what might happen in the future And we need to keep on being faithful right up to the end of our lives. We're learning the same lesson that we learned this morning. And then verse 11, it says it very clearly. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Kind of rhymes. They were dismayed and greatly afraid. So, you focus on the giant or you focus on God? That's the choice. The giant of Gath or the God of Israel and the God of all of us? Saul is focusing on the giant. And so that's why he's fearful. The army is focusing on the giant. That's why they're fearful. They are dismayed and greatly afraid. When it says that they are dismayed, they are so fearful that their morale is shattered. They are completely and utterly demoralized. Nobody has the courage to go into the battle. Their knees are weak. They are like liquid before the Philistines. God's people shouldn't be broken in pieces over Goliath. Hannah said this, the adversaries of the Lord shall be broken in pieces. So they don't have a man, but they have a woman. Maybe somebody should go and get Hannah, and she can fight Israel's battles. Because this is what she says, God will shatter to pieces the enemy. And we need to trust in that. From heaven he will thunder against them. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Only the king isn't Saul, the king is David. And of course the king is the Lord Jesus as well. Where are the faithful? Where is the man to lead them? Well, he's coming. It's just not Saul, it's David. His father will send him from a pasture to a battlefield. And it will be all very unexpected to him. He's bringing food for his brothers. And the exchange that he has with one of his brothers, really disconcerting. But it just drives him to the place where he needs to be on that battlefield. And he is going to do what God really begins to work in his heart to do. And that's the lead with conviction. So it's a battlefield for us as we go out there this week as we wrap this up. I mean, think about these first 11 verses and think about maybe the things that are fearful to you. Are you dismayed and greatly afraid? Maybe you are facing an uncertain financial situation and it has you fearful about the future. Maybe there's something in your life where you just can't seem to get over the hurdle. You've got some kind of life-dominating sin, and it just keeps you in bondage. And every time you face it, you're dismayed and greatly afraid. Maybe it's a job that's absolutely demoralizing and very difficult to go to day after day after day. You're uncertain about the future. You're dismayed and greatly afraid. There's a lot of things that we can fear out there. There's much in this world that looks a lot like Goliath that is way beyond us. And so what would God say to us tonight? He would tell us, you need to refocus. You need to have your eyes on me instead of your problems. And so let me finish with this quote from the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8 and verse 31. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things? Who shall bring a charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is he who condemns? It is Christ who died and furthermore is also risen, who is at the right hand of God, that powerful hand, who also makes intercession for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword, as it is written, for your sake we are killed all day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. Yet in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. How can somebody killed be a conqueror? Because they worship the one who gives life, eternal life. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Romans chapter 8, verses 31 through 39. Isn't that a great passage? It goes so well with what we've been talking about today. Our focus needs to be on God. We need to stop fearing, and we need to just continue to be faithful the way that God wants us to be. Let's pray together.